Hey everyone, how's it going? And welcome to the second episode of my podcast. After an amazing conversation with Joe Porter, I'm excited to announce my next guest, Jason Kros. Jason is currently the assistant coach for Princeton University's men's tennis team. He was a great player in high school and went on to play college tennis for Virginia Tech. In his senior year, he even played in the NCAA singles championship. After college, he played a little bit on the Futures circuit before coming to Princeton University and joining their coaching staff. In this conversation, we talk a lot about the qualities that Jason thinks high school athletes should develop. I'm super excited about this episode, so take a listen. Hi, Jason. How's it going?
It's going. How are you?
I'm good. I'm glad to have you on the podcast, and I'm excited for a conversation.
Yeah, thanks. I'm looking forward to it. Let's do it.
Awesome. So I guess if you can start out just by telling us the journey of how you picked up tennis and how you got to be the Princeton men's assistant coach.
Yeah, so my dad played tennis in college. He played for Rice from 85 to 89, and then put down his tennis rackets for 20 years and joined the Army. And so we moved around a lot when I was young. We lived for 1 year in Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. And when we were getting ready to move from Fort Leavenworth, Kansas to Monterey, California, the movers accidentally dropped an old plastic trash can that had my dad's old rackets from college that had not been touched in 20 years and spilled out all on the driveway in the middle of nowhere, Kansas. And my brother and I, who's 2 years younger than me, both kind of said, "Hey, what are those?" I think I had just finished first grade. He was still in kindergarten, so we were really little at the time. But we asked him what those were. He kind of explained to us. He was a college tennis player once upon a time, and both of us said, "Hey, can you teach us?" And probably 3 or 4 years went by where we were like on and off whether or not we actually really liked it. And by the time we moved back to Virginia, we dove head in, and I guess 6 or 7 years later, I ended up playing Division I at Virginia Tech. Loved every second of it. My brother actually joined me at Virginia Tech 2 years later, so we were on the team together for 2 years, and then kind of out of nowhere, I decided I wanted to stay in athletics. Originally, I said I wanted to graduate. I wanted to go to PT school. Part of me always wanted to be a physical therapist for the Army, given my dad's past, and my brother was, on track to join the Army, which he's now in. So I kind of always had that in the back of my mind. And then kind of out of nowhere, my game started to change and my level started to pick up, and I decided I wanted to stay in the sport. So when I graduated from Virginia Tech in 2019, I actually, started playing futures. I even was lucky enough to play a challenger. That was cool. And then, COVID happened.
Right.
And that kind of changed my point of view a little bit from, hey, I want to be a player to, hey, I want to stay in the sport, but on the coaching side, because at that point I had, gone 100% into, hey, I want to stay in tennis. But because of a couple of injuries, my body wasn't happy with me playing, and I knew I needed to do something to stay. So I took about a year and a half where I was the volunteer assistant coach at Virginia Tech, for the coaches I played for and the teammates I played with. And then got a call from Billy Pate, who's the head coach at Princeton on the men's side. And about 5 minutes into the conversation, he said, "Hey, I'd really like if you came and joined what we were doing at Princeton." And that was kind of all I needed to hear. It was a cool opportunity for me to see something different and join a program, maybe learn some new stuff. And that's that. I mean, I'm going into my third year now as an assistant coach on the men's side. I love the coaches I work with, and I love what we're doing at Princeton. It's a cool environment.
Awesome. Yeah. I'm glad to hear that things are working out, and I'm lucky enough to have you as a coach, so it's awesome that you're here. I kind of,
when I learn from you, I think the one thing I kind of pick up a lot is your emphasis on energy and bringing um, a certain vibe and energy to practice, and that also kind of translates to when we go out and play outside of practice. So, could you just talk to me about the impact energy has had on or like I guess the difference between maybe high school? I'm sure when you were at that level, it's not the same, that versus kind of what it's like in college and how big of an impact that has on sports in college in general.
Yeah, so tennis itself is unique in that when you're a junior, even if you're, maybe you play high school tennis, right, where you're in a team setting, but for the most part, when you're competing as a junior, you compete as an individual, right? You're not playing for a team. You're not necessarily playing for, a team coach or anything, right? You might have a personal coach, but you're not winning matches for them, right? Um, then when you get to college and suddenly you've got teammates that are relying on you and coaches that have said, hey, I'm putting my trust in you for the next 4 years to be my guy. Suddenly you start to play for more than just yourself. And that's an unbelievable feeling, right? I've seen players over the years that have kind of leaned into that mentality a little bit. And when you do that and you start to absorb, you mentioned energy, right? When you start to absorb that team energy, you've got 8 to 12, sometimes 13 guys on a team. And when everyone's counting on you to, put forward what is expected of you, and you embrace that, it really, it fills you with just like so much positive, and it's awesome. I talk about energy a lot because I think a lot of the times, because tennis is individual, it's really easy to say, I'm bad at this, I can't do that. And my other assistant at Princeton, Damian Hume, he's an awesome coach. He said, so he studied psychology. He actually played at Boise State, was a fantastic player. He studied psychology in college, and he said, for every negative thought, it takes 3 positive thoughts to offset it, right? So for us, we're like, okay, if we have good energy the entire time, right? We're constantly working to offset any of those negative thoughts. I can't do this. That was a bad shot. My teammates are relying on me, and now there's pressure, and I'm reacting negatively to that, right? But energy, which I ask of my players and I ask of everyone else that I teach as well, can help to offset that a little bit, right? Now, I think it's also important to mention, because tennis, even when you're on a team, is still me versus you. Energy can be different, right? So we had a guy at Princeton, not this year, but last year. His name is Carl Poling. He's actually playing at North Carolina now, who is a very quiet guy, right? But you always knew he was bringing the energy, right? It's a feeling, right? You don't necessarily have to be screaming your head off, right? I was a bit like that, right? I was always yelling and screaming. There's some videos of me out there where I look like a crazy person, right? But it's not the same for everyone, right? Carl's energy was like intensity and focus, and he was able to transfer that into like handling pressure from being on a team or handling pressure from being in a tough match situation. And energy, the more you can bring, the easier it's going to be to kind of absorb the position you're being put in, which is really, really fun when you really lean into it.
Right, yeah, and I know I'm sure that also picks up the teammates as well. So for high school athletes, would you say like get used to, if you're going to play college, get used to bringing that, because not only it'll help you, but you'll see it like a change in your teammates and maybe the way they're playing the game as well.
Yeah, absolutely. If you take your practice or your matches, right, and you make it about supporting the people around you, hey, I've got, I'm the last match on in a big dual match, right? We're playing a rival or whatever it is, whether it's at high school or college, right? If you're the last match on and your teammates are giving you energy and you're feeding off of it, or maybe you're down in the third set and you're still the last match on, right? And your teammates look kind of done and you're injecting energy, suddenly they're going to give it right back to you, right? So it is, and that's where tennis as an individual sport becomes really neat in team aspect, right? Because if you do it properly, you really can bounce energy off of each other and create an environment where you can compete even if things look bad.
Right. Yeah, and I think, teammates, whether it be tennis or any other sport, that definitely has a big impact on you, where you are, the culture you're in. As someone who's worked with a lot of teammates and now as a coach with players, could you give me maybe one good quality that from good teammates that you really like to see, and then maybe one thing that, hey, when I see, I don't like when people do that, or that's definitely negatively impacting the other people around them?
Yeah, so I think one good thing, because the whole purpose of this, right, is to help people understand what it takes to see the next level, right? And I think the biggest thing is being coachable, right? Whether it's by a teammate or a friend or a coach or your parents, right? Everyone gets a little bit of input from everywhere, right? Your ability to be coachable is a huge determinant of whether or not you can improve as an athlete in any sport, right? Or as a person, right? Whether you're working a job or you're in a class or whatever it is, right? If you're able to be coachable, you're able to take constructive criticism. Someone's like, hey, you did this wrong. Try X, Y, and Z. You can filter out X and Y and say, I don't like those. But hey, Z sounds like a good idea. Let's see if I can input that. Maybe it'll work. Maybe it doesn't. And if it doesn't work, then you say, okay, maybe I go back to X and Y. I didn't like them, but Z didn't work. Let's see what I can do to change this, right? And input comes from everywhere, right? Like when I was playing, sometimes, if I made a silly mistake in a doubles match or something, my partner would say something. And if I shut off, I'm like, hey man, like you're not my coach. You can't give me good information here, then that's on me for not being coachable, even though he's not my coach, right? I'm not giving myself the opportunity to learn. And I think something that I don't like to see from athletes, as far as like building that team energy, and people want to be college athletes, and this is super important, right? You need to be willing to communicate. And I've played with guys and I've coached guys who are not always willing to communicate. And whether it's to another player, another coach, if you're meant to be on a team with someone, if you have a problem with a person, you need to be able to tell that person. And as the person receiving it's a complaint or a compliment or whatever it is, right? Whatever kind of communication it is, as the person receiving that, you can't always take it personally. It's not an attack, right? It goes back to being coachable, right? But some people, they don't want to do that at all, right? And when they don't want to do that at all, it kind of shuts them off. And when you get shut off from the people who you're supposed to be learning from, coaches, players, parents, right? Your ability to improve and your ability to absorb the information around you and really become a part of what you're trying to do, because everyone has this image of what they're trying to do, right? But as soon as you lose that ability to communicate, you lose the ability to be coachable. And then you're going to stay exactly where you are to the extent that your own personal dialogue can coach you, right? Mm-hmm. And some of us, like, I think I'm a pretty good coach, right? But I can't coach myself as well as some of the other coaches could coach me, because I can't see myself the same way that someone else sees me. Right. So if you can't communicate, you can't be coachable. And if you can be coachable, then everything is open to you as far as like what you're trying to do going forward.
Right. Yeah, I think those two go hand in hand. And as an athlete in high school, where it's more like in many situations you're competing with the people around you, your teammates, to kind of go to college, I think it's really easy and really natural to kind of put sort of like an ego into it and say like, hey, like, I'm as good as you, or I'm right there. Like, I'm not going to listen to my teammates. Like, I feel like that's the biggest, I wouldn't say issue, but something that can definitely be improved in terms of like high school culture. Like, that the ability for you to not only learn from those who are coaches and that have that title, but to always be learning from whoever it is around you, I think is a big deal and can definitely elevate you as a person, he was an athlete, whatever it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. I have one last question. This question is for everyone that's coming on this podcast. Do you feel like everything you've done to get up to this point in your tennis career of assistant coach, wherever you are, whatever you've accomplished, do you feel like it's all worth it, or would you change anything about your journey?
That's a good one. Wow. Yeah. So the only thing I would change, and people who know me and people who knew me growing up as I was playing, from maybe 14 to 18 or 19, right, would know that I didn't always keep my head on. So the only thing I would change would be, to go back and kind of tell myself that, 1 point isn't that important, right? One match isn't that important. One set isn't that important. It's not the end of the world, right? Because in those moments when I lost control, I lost the ability to be coachable, right? And I struggled with that with whoever my coach was at any point in time over a long stretch of time there, where I had the talent and I had the drive, but I sometimes wasn't coachable. But was it worth it? Everything I've done? Absolutely. Yeah. I think the only reason I can say absolutely is because I now understand the flaws I had as a player, right? And so that's why, whether it's my team guys or, other people that I coach, right, yourself being included, right, you hear a lot of these things, right? I talk about energy and I talk about being coachable and I talk about, what it means to have a good practice, because I did not always do that. Was it worth it? Absolutely. But I would change, I'd go back and tell myself the same things I preach now. Hey, you got to listen, right? You have to be open-minded and be willing to accept failure as a pathway to success.
That's understandable. I think it's 2 for 2 for was it worth it? So I think it's a good sign that, hey, all the works finally will end up to work. Things will work out, whatever it is. It's great to hear.
Oh, it's an interesting story.
It's unique, but hey, that's why we're here and trying to hear it out and see what it was like for you. Well, I appreciate having you on the podcast. Thank you for your time, and it's great to hear the story and the wisdom as well. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is good, and I think what you're doing is a really cool thing, and I think you're going to impact some people who don't know that they're going to be impacted yet. So this is really neat.
I appreciate it. Have a good one.
All right, thanks, Rishabh.
Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed the second episode of my podcast. Jason's a pretty cool guy, so I hope you were able to learn something new from what he was saying. Follow me on Instagram if you've not already, and make sure to share this with anyone who you think could benefit from this conversation. Have a great day.